Now you're mine.
She walked into a corridor completely exposed, thinking she was alone. He saw what he never should have, and she wanted what she never could. And that single mistake changed everything. He was the mafia boss she was never meant to get close to, let alone fall in love with. Now, married to the most dangerous man in the city, she has become the #1 target of his enemies, who want her dead. This story is part 2 of Christian and Sienna.
Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
Chapter 1. Blood in the Bathroom.
Why am I still here?
I woke up alone. Not unusual. Christian's schedule meant early mornings, late nights, phone calls at 3 a.m. that he took in his office with the door closed. 8 months of marriage had taught me that being a Don's wife meant getting used to absences, silences, and the kind of secrets that kept me safe by keeping me ignorant. But the blood in his bathroom was new, not a lot. Just droplets on the white marble counter, a smear on the towel he'd used and left in the hamper, instead of throwing in the laundry like he usually did. And, when I looked closer, a crimson stain on the cuff of the shirt he'd worn yesterday that was now balled up behind the door. My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed another. Me, where are you? Me, are you okay? Me, why is there blood in your bathroom? I sent all 3 before I could overthink it, then stood there staring at my screen waiting for the read receipt that didn't come. Talking to yourself again? I jumped, spinning to find Marco leaning against the bedroom doorframe with coffee and his usual expression of amused concern. That meant he'd been standing there long enough to watch me spiral. Your brother-in-law disappeared in the middle of the night, I said, showing him the bathroom. Then left this. Marco's expression shifted from amused to carefully neutral in the way that meant he knew something I didn't. He's fine, Marco said, but his tone was too controlled. Marco, I said, using the voice that had worked on him since we were teenagers. Don't lie to me. What happened? My brother sighed, set down the coffee, and closed the bedroom door with the kind of deliberate care that meant whatever he was about to say required privacy. And there was a situation last night, he said carefully. Territory dispute with some crew from the east side. Christian handled it personally when it got physical. He's fine, Marco added quickly when I opened my mouth. Minor cut on his arm. Already stitched. He didn't want to wake you. He got into a fight and didn't tell me, I said slowly, anger mixing with fear in ways I was still learning to navigate. He got into a negotiation that became a fight, Marco corrected. And he didn't tell you because you've been sleeping poorly, and he's trying to let you rest. I'm sleeping poorly because I can feel when something's wrong, I said. Don't defend him. I'm not defending him, Marco replied. I'm explaining him. There's a difference. He picked up the coffee again and handed it to me. Drink. You look like you need it. I accepted the cup because arguing felt exhausting, and because Marco was right. I'd barely slept the past week, kept waking up with a sense of dread I couldn't explain. Where is he now? I asked. Office, Marco said. Conference call with the Western Territories. Should be done in an hour. And you're here because? I pressed. Because Christian asked me to check on you, Marco admitted, and make sure you weren't freaking out if you woke up alone, which you clearly are, so mission accomplished. I'm an excellent brother. You're an employed brother, I corrected. He's paying you to babysit me. He's paying me to make sure his wife doesn't do anything reckless, like show up at his office demanding explanations while he's negotiating with people who'd love to use you as leverage, Marco said. So yes, professional babysitting. I'm very good at it. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Marco had that effect, making terrible situations slightly less terrible through sheer force of personality. I hate this, I admitted. Sitting on the bed, the not knowing, the blood, the way everyone treats me like I'm fragile. You're not fragile, Marco said, sitting beside me. You married a man who runs a criminal empire, and you've survived every dinner with Dad, which is honestly more impressive. But Sienna, you're also the thing Christian values most in this world. That makes you valuable to his enemies too. And that's terrifying for all of us. I know, I said quietly. I just wish he'd let me help instead of protecting me from everything. He's learning, Marco offered. Remember when you two first got married? He wouldn't even let you in the same room when he took business calls. Now you sit through family dinners where people discuss territory like it's real estate. Progress, I said dryly. Actual progress, Marco corrected. Give him time, and maybe don't mention the blood thing right away. Let him tell you on his own terms. That sounds like terrible advice, I observed. It's strategic advice, Marco replied. There's a difference. My phone finally buzzed with Christian's response. Christian, I'm fine. Call ran long. Home in an hour. Stay inside, please. Me, why is there blood in your bathroom? Christian, I'll explain when I get home. I promise. Just stay inside. The please and the promise told me he knew I was upset, and that stay inside Told me there was more going on than a simple territory dispute. He's being careful, Marco observed, reading over my shoulder. That's good. That's concerning, I corrected. When has Christian ever been careful about anything involving business? When it involves you, Marco said simply. Sienna, the man went full scorched earth on Luca Ferrara for sending those shooters to Mom's garden. You think he's going to be casual about protecting you now? He had a point, but it didn't make me feel better. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Marco stayed. Making breakfast neither of us really ate while providing commentary on absolutely everything to fill the silence. He told me about the new security protocols Christian had implemented, about territorial negotiations with families I'd never heard of, about Valentina Russo getting engaged to some finance executive and moving to London. Good for her, I said, meaning it. Valentina and I had reached an understanding months ago. She'd accepted that Christian had chosen me. I'd accepted that she'd genuinely cared about him, and we'd both moved on. Very good for her, Marco agreed. Though between you and me, I think she misses the drama. Finance executives are boring compared to Mafia dons. Everything's boring compared to Mafia dons, I said. That's kind of the problem. Christian finally arrived just after 11, walking in looking exhausted and tense, and his eyes found me immediately with the kind of intensity that still made my breath catch after 8 months. You're okay, he said, and it wasn't quite a question. I'm fine, I replied. You're bleeding, or were bleeding, Marco told me. Of course he did, Christian said, shooting my brother a look that Marco ignored completely. She asked, Marco said innocently. What was I supposed to do? Lie. Yes, Christian replied flatly. That's terrible relationship advice, Marco observed, standing. I'm going to leave you two to discuss honesty and bloodstains. Sienna, call if you need me. Christian, try not to die. It would really complicate my employment situation. He left before either of us could respond, and I heard him laughing as he closed the front door. Your brother is extremely annoying, Christian said. My brother is extremely loyal, I corrected. And you like him, so stop pretending you don't. I tolerate him professionally, Christian amended, but he was almost smiling as he said it. We stood there for a moment, the morning light filtering through the windows, and I watched him try to figure out how much to tell me. Just say it, I said finally. And whatever happened last night, whatever's making you tense, just tell me. I can handle it. I know you can, Christian said, crossing to me and pulling me close. That's not the problem. The problem is, I don't want you to have to handle it. That's not your choice to make, I replied, looking up at him. I married you knowing who you were. That includes the blood and the territory disputes, and the enemies. You don't get to protect me from our life. I can try, Christian said, but something in his expression was vulnerable. The blood, I pressed. What happened? Territory negotiation with the Kozlov crew, he said carefully. They wanted access to the northern routes. I declined. They pushed. It got physical. One of them had a knife. I was faster. He wasn't. Is he alive? I asked, needing to know. Barely, Christian admitted. I'm in a hospital under watch. He'll recover, eventually. And your arm? I asked, touching the spot where I knew the cut was hidden under his shirt. 12 stitches, Christian said. Clean cut. Marcus handled it. I'm fine. You didn't wake me, I said. You were sleeping, he replied. First full night you'd slept in a week. I wasn't going to ruin that by showing up bleeding. I'd rather know, I said. I'd rather be awake and worried than asleep and ignorant. I know, Christian said, kissing my forehead, and I'm trying. But Sienna, you make me weak in ways I can't afford, and knowing you're safe lets me do what needs to be done without hesitation. I don't want to be your weakness, I said. I want to be your partner. You are, he replied, but you're also the thing I value most in this world. And that means sometimes I'm going to be overprotective and impossible. Can you live with that? I should have said yes, should have accepted the protection and moved on. But his phone buzzed with a message that made his expression go absolutely lethal, and I watched him read something that drained the color from his face. What? I demanded. Christian, what is it? He showed me the screen, and I felt ice flood through my veins at the message displayed there. Unknown. Volkov knows about the girl. She's pretty. Be a shame if something happened. Attached was a photo of me leaving our building that morning, taken from across the street, close enough to be clear, far enough to show how easy I'd been to photograph. Who's Volkov? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Someone I thought I'd buried, Christian said, already making calls. But someone who's about to learn why threatening you is the worst mistake anyone can make. And standing there looking at that photo, I realized that blood in the bathroom had been a warning. This was the real threat. Chapter 2. The name he never said within 20 minutes.
What's going on here?
Our penthouse had transformed into something resembling a war room. Marcus appeared with 2 other security personnel I vaguely recognized from family events. Marco materialized with his laptop already open to what looked like surveillance feeds, and Christian stood at the windows making calls in rapid Italian that sounded increasingly lethal. I sat on the couch trying not to feel like a problem being managed, and failing spectacularly. Coffee? Marco offered, appearing beside me with a mug. It's 11 a.m., I said. I've had 3 cups already. Then this is cup 4, he replied, pressing it into my hands. Trust me, you'll want the caffeine for this conversation. That's comforting, I said dryly, but I accepted the mug anyway. Christian finished his call and turned to face the room with the kind of controlled fury I'd only seen a few times before. Once when Luca had sent those shooters, once when a rival family had tried to move on his territory, and now, Volkov, he said, and the name landed like a bomb. Dmitry Volkov. Anyone not familiar with that name needs to be. I know it, Marcus said grimly. Thought he was still in prison. Released 6 weeks ago, Christian replied. Good behavior. Political connections. Someone paid the right people to expedite his release. Who is he? I asked, needing context. Christian looked at me with something complicated in his expression before answering. Someone I destroyed 8 years ago, before I knew you, before I became Dawn, when I was still learning how to handle threats. Destroyed how? I pressed. His organization ran trafficking through the northern ports, Christian said flatly. Human trafficking. Children. I found out, gathered evidence, turned it over to the FBI while simultaneously dismantling his entire operation from the inside. The room went very quiet. His wife and daughter were in a car that was targeted during the raid, Christian continued, his voice carefully controlled. They weren't supposed to be there. I didn't know they would be there, but my information led to that raid, and they died in the crossfire. He blames me, rightfully. You stopped him from trafficking children, I said slowly. That's not something to feel guilty about. I'm not guilty about stopping him, Christian corrected. I'm realistic about consequences. His family died because of choices I made. Now he wants me to feel the same loss. The implication settled over me like ice water. Me, I said. He wants to kill me. He wants to take you, Christian corrected. And somehow that was worse. Make me watch you suffer the way he watched his family suffer. Then kill you. Then come for me when I'm broken. I stopped, trying to process. That's insane. That's grief and rage with 8 years in prison to plan revenge, Marco said quietly. It's not rational. It's personal, which makes it more dangerous. Marcus added, personal vendettas don't follow normal rules. So what do? I asked, looking at Christian. You leave, he said flatly. Tonight, Marco takes you somewhere safe, somewhere Volkov can't find you, and you stay there until this is handled. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Sienna, Christian started. No, I interrupted, standing. I'm not running. I'm not hiding, and I'm not letting you face this alone while I sit in some safe house wondering if you're alive. This isn't a negotiation, Christian said, his voice going hard. And this is me keeping you alive. This is you treating me like a problem instead of a partner. I shot back. I married you knowing the risks. I chose this life. You don't get to exile me the moment it gets dangerous. It was always dangerous, Christian replied. This is different. This is a man with nothing to lose targeting the only thing I can't afford to sacrifice. Then we handle it together, I said firmly, like we've handled everything else. Like we promised we would when I married you in that garden 8 months ago. I watched something shift in his expression, and I pressed the advantage. You promised your father you'd protect me, I said, using the one thing I knew would reach him. But protecting me doesn't mean hiding me away. It means trusting me to be strong enough to face this with you. Christian stared at me for a long moment before turning to Marco. You see what I'm dealing with? I see someone who's exactly as stubborn as you are, Marco replied, which is what you wanted when you married a Cavaliere. We don't run, Christian. We're Italian. We hold grudges and fight back. Not helpful, Christian said, but I heard resignation beneath the words. Actually very helpful, Marco countered. Sienna's right. Sending her away just makes her a target without your protection. At least here, she's surrounded by people who'd die before letting Volkov touch her. That's supposed to be comforting? I asked. That's supposed to be factual, Marco corrected. You married into this family. That means we protect you, even from psychotic Russians with revenge fantasies. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to find a message from my father. Dad, Christian called. I'm coming over. Don't argue. You called my father? I asked Christian. I called Giovanni because this affects his family too, Christian replied. Volkov won't differentiate between Rossi and Cavalieri. If he can't get to you directly, he'll go after your family for leverage. So now my parents are targets too, I said, anger mixing with fear. Now your parents are protected, Christian corrected. Your father has resources I'm utilizing. Your mother is being moved to a secure location as we speak. Marco is staying here. And you, he moved closer, his hands framing my face. You are not leaving my sight until Volkov is handled. Permanently. Handled meaning? I asked carefully. Handled meaning I'm going to do what I should have done 8 years ago, Christian said, and his voice was absolutely lethal. I'm going to make sure he can never threaten anyone I love again. The admission, casual, honest, terrifying, made my heart skip. I love you too, I said, and which is why I'm not letting you face this alone. You're impossible, Christian said, but he kissed me anyway, desperate and claiming, and I kissed him back, thinking that I'd married danger and chaos, and apparently that meant dealing with psychotic Russians who wanted revenge. I hate to interrupt this moment, Marcus said from across the room, but we have another problem. We broke apart, and I watched Christian shift back into Don mode immediately. What problem? He asked. Volkov just sent another message, Marcus said, showing his phone, this time to the family channel. He's making this public. Christian took the phone, and I watched his expression go from lethal to absolutely murderous as he read whatever was displayed there. What does it say? I asked. It says, Christian replied, his voice deadly calm, that he's given me 72 hours to deliver you to him voluntarily, or he'll start killing people in my organization one by one until I comply. The room went silent. That's, I started, an empty threat, Marcus finished. He doesn't have the manpower or resources to actually execute that kind of systematic killing. No, Christian said quietly, but he has enough to make it look like he does, and that's almost as effective. Fear and uncertainty are weapons too. So we have 3 days, I said slowly. We have 3 days to find him first, Christian corrected, before he makes good on any part of that threat. My father arrived 30 minutes later, looking exactly how I'd expected. Controlled fury wrapped in expensive suit, the kind of cold calculation that had built the Cavalieri Empire on strategic thinking and ruthless efficiency. Dmitry Volkov, he said by way of greeting. I remember when you took him down. Didn't think he'd be stupid enough to come back. He spent 8 years planning this, Christian replied. That's not stupidity. That's patience. That's suicide, my father corrected. He's threatening both our families. That means he's declared war on 2 of the most powerful organizations in this city. He won't survive it. He doesn't care about surviving, I said quietly. He cares about revenge. He's already lost everything. What's left to threaten him with? Both men looked at me, and I saw recognition in their expressions. She's right, my father said finally, which makes him exponentially more dangerous. Men with nothing to lose don't negotiate. They burn everything down. Then we burn him first, Christian said flatly. And standing there in our war room surrounded by security and strategy, I realized this was my life now. Not safety, not certainty, not the controlled existence I'd once craved, but this, danger and family and fighting back together. And somehow, I was fine with that. Chapter 3, Lockdown.
What happened to my life?
The security protocols Christian implemented over the next 48 hours made our previous life look almost normal by comparison. I couldn't leave the penthouse, not for work, not for coffee, not even to step onto our private balcony without Marcus or one of his team doing a sweep first. The windows got reinforced glass installed overnight. The elevator required 3 separate authentication methods, and Marco had moved into our guest room with enough equipment to run surveillance on half the city. This is excessive, I said on day 2, watching another team install what looked like military-grade motion sensors. This is necessary, Christian corrected from where he sat reviewing security footage with Marcus. Volkov has connections we're still mapping. Until we know his full network, we assume he has eyes everywhere. I feel like a prisoner, I admitted. You're protected, Christian replied, not looking up. There's a difference. Is there? I challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it looks identical. He finally looked at me, and I saw exhaustion beneath the control. He'd barely slept since Volkov's message, spending nights on calls and reviewing intelligence reports while I pretended to sleep and failed. I know this is difficult, he said, his voice gentler. But Sienna, if something happened to you because I didn't take every precaution, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the thought. I can't. I won't risk that. I'm not asking you to risk me, I said. I'm asking you to let me breathe. Marco appeared from the guest room with coffee and his usual impeccable timing. Compromise suggestion. Sienna can use the balcony for 30 minutes daily with security posted. Fresh air, sunshine, illusion of freedom. Everyone wins. Everyone doesn't win, Christian said flatly. Volkov could have a sniper positioned on any of the surrounding buildings. Then we get counter-sniper surveillance. Marco replied easily. Already ordered the equipment. Should arrive this afternoon. I watched Christian war with protective instinct versus Marco's logic, and finally saw him nod once. 30 minutes, he said, supervised. And if anything looks remotely suspicious, you come inside immediately. I'll take it, I said, because small victories mattered when your husband was treating your home like a fortress. The rest of day 2 passed slowly. I tried working remotely, but concentration felt impossible when armed guards were rotating shifts outside our door, and Christian kept having tense conversations in Italian that ended with people promising to handle things quietly. By evening, I'd reorganized our bookshelf 3 times, color-coded the kitchen pantry, and alphabetized Christian's ridiculous wine collection, which Marco found hilarious. You're coping through control, he observed, watching me arrange bottles with geometric precision. Very on brand. I'm coping through productive distraction, I corrected. You're spiraling, Marco said gently, which is understandable, given that a psychotic Russian wants to kidnap you. But Sienna, the wine doesn't care if it's alphabetized. I care, I replied. I need something I can control when everything else is chaos. Then control this, Marco said, handing me his laptop. Help me track Volkov's known associates. You're good at pattern recognition. Use it. I stared at the screen showing spreadsheets of names, locations, and connections mapped like a spider web. Christian will hate this. Christian will survive, Marco replied. You're going insane from inactivity. This gives you purpose and actually helps. Win-win. He wasn't wrong. I spent the next 3 hours analyzing patterns in Volkov's network, finding connections Marcus had missed, identifying potential weak points that could be exploited. You're terrifyingly good at this, Marco said, watching me work. Have you considered a career in organized crime? I married into it, I replied. That's close enough. Around 9 p.m., I felt the first wave of nausea, dismissed it as stress and lack of real food. I'd been surviving on coffee and whatever Marco kept shoving at me, but by 10, the nausea had intensified, and I excused myself to the bathroom trying not to be obvious. You okay? Marco called through the door. Fine, I lied, splashing water on my face. Just tired. You look pale, he observed when I emerged. When's the last time you ate actual food? This morning, I said, which wasn't technically a lie if coffee counted as food. That's not eating, Marco said, already moving toward the kitchen. That's caffeinating. There's a difference. He made pasta with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to cook out of necessity, and I forced myself to eat a few bites despite my stomach's protests. Better? He asked. Sure, I lied, and changed the subject before he could press. Where's Christian? Emergency meeting with the Eastern families, Marco said. Volkov's been making noise about expanding his threats beyond just us. Christian's consolidating alliances. How long? I asked. Few more hours, probably, Marco replied. Why? You miss him? I miss feeling like we're handling this together instead of him handling it while I'm locked in a tower, I admitted. And you're helping more than you think, Marco said, gesturing to the laptop still open with my analysis. This information you found? Marcus already sent it to Christian. It's useful. Sienna, you're useful, even when you're alphabetizing wine. I was about to respond when Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We have a problem, he said. One of our safe houses was hit tonight, the one where we'd moved some of the younger family members for protection. My blood ran cold. How bad? 2 dead, 3 injured, Marcus said flatly, and Volkov left a message, written in blood on the living room wall. What did it say? I asked, dreading the answer. Marcus showed his phone, and I felt sick reading the words captured in the crime scene photo. 48 hours left, tick-tock. He's escalating, Marco said quietly, killing people to prove he's serious. We need to call Christian, I said. Already did, Marcus replied. He's on his way back. Said to move you to the secure room until he gets here. The secure room was essentially a panic room Christian had insisted on installing. Reinforced walls, separate air system, communications equipment, enough supplies to survive a siege. I'd never actually been inside it. Is that necessary? I asked. After tonight? Yes, Marcus said. Volkov just proved he can reach our protected locations. Until we understand how, we're not taking chances. Marco took my hand, squeezing once. Come on, I'll stay with you. We can continue analyzing data, make it productive instead of just hiding. I hate this, I said as we moved toward the secure room. I know, Marco replied, but you're alive to hate it. That's what matters. The secure room door was disguised as a wall panel in Christian's office, and Marcus activated it with fingerprint and code combination before ushering us inside. The space was larger than I'd expected, maybe 15 by 20 feet, set up like a small apartment with bed, bathroom, kitchenette, and a bank of monitors showing every angle of our penthouse and building. Welcome to the fortress within the fortress, Marco said, trying for levity, and at least it has good Wi-Fi. I sat on the bed feeling trapped, despite the relative comfort, and watched the monitors showing our empty penthouse, wondering how my life had gone from wedding in a garden to hiding in a panic room in 8 months. My phone buzzed with Christian's message. Christian, I'm sorry. I'll make this right. I promise. Me. Just come home safe. Christian. Always. Te amo. The Italian made my chest tight, and I set down the phone trying not to think about the blood on that wall, the message counting down our time, and the fact that Volkov was getting closer with every move. Hey, Marco said, sitting beside me. We'll figure this out. Christian won't let anything happen to you. I know, I said. I just wish figuring it out didn't require hiding while people die. That's what makes you good for him, Marco replied. Oh, you actually care. You're not numb to it. Before I could respond, every monitor went black simultaneously. Then the emergency lights activated, bathing everything in red, and we heard the explosion from somewhere above us. Chapter 4, The Offer and the Insult.
Protect yourself.
The explosion had come from 3 floors above us, a controlled detonation that took out a corner office Christian rarely used, strategic enough to send a message without causing catastrophic damage. Volkov's calling card. I can reach you anywhere. By the time Christian arrived 20 minutes later, security had swept the entire building twice, and I was still locked in the panic room with Marco, who'd spent the entire time making increasingly dark jokes to keep me from spiraling. At least if we die in here, we'll die with excellent Wi-Fi, he said, monitoring the feeds. That's something. Marco, I said flatly. Too soon, he asked innocently. The door opened, and Christian appeared, looking more lethal than I'd ever seen him, and I watched his eyes scan me head to toe, checking for injuries before pulling me into his arms with bruising intensity. You're okay, he said against my hair. You're okay. I'm fine, I replied, wrapping my arms around him. We were already in here when it happened. Marco made sure. Marco did his job, Christian corrected, looking at my brother over my head. And thank you. Just following orders, Marco said. Though maybe we discuss hazard pay later. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Christian pulled back, his hands framing my face. This ends now. I'm moving you somewhere Volkov can't reach. No arguments. Actually, Marcus appeared at the door, his expression grim. We have another problem. Volkov just sent a message through a third party. He wants to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate, Christian said flatly. He's offering terms, Marcus continued. Says if you meet him face to face, neutral location, he'll consider alternatives to his current plan. It's a trap, Christian replied immediately. Obviously, Marcus agreed, but he's making noise that if you refuse, the attacks escalate. Next time won't be an empty office. Christian was quiet for a long moment, and I watched him calculate odds and options with the cold efficiency that had made him dawn. Set up the meeting, he said finally, but I control the location, the security, and the terms. And Sienna stays here with triple guard. I want to be part of the meeting, I said immediately. Absolutely not, Christian replied. He's using me as leverage, I pointed out. I should be there to hear what he actually wants. He wants you dead or suffering, Christian said bluntly. That's what he wants. You being in the room just gives him a target. Then bring enough security that he can't act on it, I challenged. But Christian, I'm tired of being the problem everyone's managing. Let me be part of the solution. You being alive is the solution, he replied. Everything else is just strategy. Before I could argue further, my father appeared, looking unusually tense. Giovanni, Christian greeted. What happened? Volkov's people made contact, my father said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. With your mother, he added, looking at me. At her sister's house where we'd moved her for safety. My blood ran cold. Is she okay? She's fine, my father said quickly. They didn't threaten her directly. They just made sure she knew they could reach her. Left a gift on her doorstep with a note. What kind of gift? Christian asked, his tone dangerous. My father pulled out his phone, showing a photo that made my stomach drop. It was a bouquet of white lilies, funeral flowers, with a card that read, "For the Cavalieri matriarch, may she not need these too soon." That's a death threat, I said, anger mixing with fear. And that's psychological warfare, Christian corrected, his voice absolutely lethal. He's showing he can reach everyone we care about, making us afraid to protect anyone because it paints a target on them. So what do we do? I asked. We consolidate, Christian said. Everyone important comes here, to properties we control completely, and we make it very clear to Volkov that threatening families means total war. 3 days later, the meeting with Volkov was set for neutral ground, a restaurant owned by a family that owed favors to both sides, closed for the evening. Security from multiple organizations ensuring no one tried anything stupid. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd spent 3 days trapped in the penthouse while Christian orchestrated strategy, and I was done being passive. You're insane, Marco said when I told him my plan. Christian will actually kill me if I help you sneak into that meeting. Then don't help, I replied, already pulling up the restaurant's layout on his laptop. Just don't stop me. That's the same thing, Marco protested. Sienna, this is dangerous. Volkov is unstable and violent, and you being there just gives him ammunition. I'm going, I said firmly. Then you can either help me do it safely, or I'll figure it out myself, and probably make stupid mistakes. Marco stared at me for a long moment before sighing heavily. You're exactly like him. You know that. Stubborn, reckless, convinced you're right even when you're being idiotic. Is that a yes? I asked. I'm going to regret this, but fine, Marco replied, already pulling up security protocols. But if Christian kills me, I'm haunting you forever. Getting into the restaurant without being seen by Christian's security required creativity, and Marco's concerning familiarity with bypassing protocols, but we managed it. I ended up in a private viewing room above the main dining area, soundproofed glass letting me see and hear everything without being visible to the people below. Christian sat at a table with Marcus and 2 other men I recognized from family events. Across from them was Dmitry Volkov, older than I'd expected, maybe 60, with the kind of weathered face that suggested violence had been his companion for decades. "Thank you for meeting," Volkov said in accented English, his tone almost pleasant. "I appreciate your willingness to negotiate." "I'm not negotiating," Christian replied coldly. "I'm listening. There's a difference." "Fair enough," Volkov agreed. "Then listen to this. I want what you took from me. My family, my life, my future. Since I cannot have those things back, I will settle for equivalent loss." "Meaning?" Christian asked, though we all knew. "Meaning your wife," Volkov said simply. "Give her to me, voluntarily. Let me have 3 days with her, and then I disappear. No more attacks. No more threats. Your organization stays intact. Everyone you care about stays safe." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees, and I watched Christian's expression go absolutely murderous. "That's not an offer," he said, his voice deadly calm. "That's a fantasy. It's the only offer you're getting," Volkov replied. 3 days with the woman you love, or I dismantle everything you've built piece by piece. Your choice." I felt sick listening to him discuss me like I was property to be traded, and I saw Christian's hands flatten on the table with controlled violence. "She's not yours to offer or take," Christian said, "and the fact that you think I'd even consider this tells me you've fundamentally misunderstood who you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly," Volkov said. "You're a man who values power and control. I'm offering you a choice. Sacrifice one person you love, or watch everyone you care about suffer. That's not misunderstanding. That's strategy. That's suicide," Christian corrected. "Because the moment you made my wife part of this, you guaranteed your death. Whether it takes days or months or years, I will find you, and I will make you regret every decision that led you to this table." Before Volkov could respond, the restaurant's side entrance opened, and 2 men walked in who immediately made my instincts flare. They weren't security. They moved wrong, too casual, too confident, like they were there to deliver a message rather than protect anyone. One of them approached Christian's table holding a tablet, and I watched him show the screen to Christian while speaking in Russian. Whatever was displayed made Christian go absolutely still in a way that terrified me more than violence would have. "What is that?" Marcus demanded. The man switched to English, clearly intending for everyone to hear. "Proof that your wife is not as protected as you think, and evidence that perhaps she is not as loyal as you believe." My stomach dropped as the man turned the tablet toward Volkov, showing him whatever images had made Christian react. "Your security is good," Volkov said, studying the screen, "but not perfect. My people have been watching her, getting close, testing boundaries." "What boundaries?" Christian asked, his voice dangerous. "Whether she would be faithful if tempted," Volkov replied. "Whether she could be seduced away from you. Whether she is weak enough to exploit." One of Volkov's men pulled out printed photos, spreading them on the table with deliberate slowness, and from my position above I could see them clearly. Photos of me at the penthouse pool yesterday when I'd convinced Marcus to let me swim for 30 minutes under guard. I'd worn a modest one-piece, but the photos had been taken from angles that made it look deliberately provocative. Close-ups, intimate framing, the kind of shots designed to feel invasive, and worse, photos of a man I didn't recognize standing too close to me near the pool deck, talking, his body language suggesting familiarity we absolutely didn't have. "That's edited," I said aloud in the viewing room, even though no one could hear me. That never happened, but watching Christian's reaction, I knew the damage was done, not because he believed I'd been unfaithful, but because Volkov's people had gotten that close to me without anyone stopping them. "One of my people approached your wife yesterday," Volkov said casually, "posed as a pool maintenance worker, had an entire conversation with her. She was very friendly, very trusting." "You're lying," Christian said flatly, but I heard the edge of fear beneath the anger. "Am I?" Volkov replied, sliding another photo across the table. "This was taken 24 hours ago. My man, your wife, close enough to touch, close enough to hurt, and your security didn't even notice." The photo showed me talking to someone I vaguely remembered, a worker who'd said something about checking the pool filters. I'd responded politely, maybe 30 seconds of interaction, then gone back inside. But in the photo, he was standing closer than I remembered. His hand was near my arm in a way that looked deliberate, and my expression looked almost receptive. "Photoshopped," Marcus said immediately. "Body language is wrong. Angles don't match. This is doctored." "Perhaps," Volkov agreed. "Or perhaps your security is not as impenetrable as you believe. Perhaps I can reach her any time I want. Perhaps she is not safe even in your fortress." Christian stood abruptly, the chair scraping against floor with violence, and I watched him struggle to maintain control. "This meeting is over," he said. "And Volkov, if any of your people come within a mile of my wife again, I will consider it an act of war. and I will respond accordingly. We're already at war, Volkov replied, standing too. I'm just showing you how close I can get to the things you love. Think about my offer. 3 days, then peace. Or I keep getting closer until I take what I want anyway. He left with his men, and I watched Christian turn to Marcus with barely controlled fury. How did they get that close? He demanded. How did someone approach her at our pool without being stopped? I don't know, Marcus admitted, already pulling out his phone, but I'll find out. And whoever let that breach happen will be handled. She's not safe here, Christian said, and I heard something close to panic beneath the rage. If they got that close once, they can do it again. We need to move her. Tonight. Christian, Marcus started. Tonight, Christian repeated, his voice absolute. I don't care where, just somewhere they can't reach her. Set it up. I watched him leave the restaurant with controlled violence in every movement, and I knew I had approximately 20 minutes to get back to the penthouse before he realized I'd left. Marco and I made it back with 5 minutes to spare, and I was sitting on the couch pretending to read when Christian walked in looking like murder in expensive tailoring. We need to talk, he said, his voice tight. About, I asked, even though I knew. About the fact that Volkov's people got close enough to photograph you yesterday, Christian replied. About the fact that someone approached you at our pool and you didn't immediately report it. It was a pool maintenance worker, I said, confused. He said like 3 words to me about filters. I didn't think. That's the problem, Christian interrupted, his voice rough. You didn't think, because you're not trained to see threats the way we are, and that makes you vulnerable. I was surrounded by security, I protested. Marcus was right there. Marcus was checking the perimeter, Christian said, pulling out his phone and showing me the photos. And in those 30 seconds, Volkov's man got close enough to touch you, to hurt you, to take you if that had been his objective. I stared at the photos, seeing them properly for the first time, and felt violated in ways I couldn't quite articulate. The angles were invasive, intimate, designed to make me look exposed and vulnerable. This is edited, I said. He wasn't that close, and I definitely didn't look at him like that. I know, Christian said, surprising me. Marcus confirmed the photos are doctored. But Sienna, the fact that they got close enough to take any photos is the problem. The fact that you're not safe even in our home is the problem. So what's the solution? I asked. And lock me in that panic room permanently. Never let me see daylight. Treat me like a prisoner instead of your wife. The solution is you leave, Christian said flatly. Tonight, somewhere Volkov can't find you. Somewhere I know you're actually safe. We had this conversation already, I said, standing. I'm not leaving. You don't have a choice anymore, Christian replied, and something in his tone was absolute. And after seeing those photos, after knowing how close they got, I can't protect you here, and I can't function knowing you're one security breach away from being taken. Then function scared, I said, anger flaring. Because I'm not running, Christian. I'm staying right here, and we're handling this together, like we promised. Promises don't matter if you're dead, he shot back. And I'd rather die here with you than live somewhere safe and alone, I replied, and watched him flinch at the words. We stood there staring at each other, both furious and terrified, and I saw the moment he broke. Those photos, he said quietly, dangerously. Seeing you like that, knowing someone else was that close to you, seeing him looking at you like, he stopped, jaw tight. It made me want to destroy everything, not because I don't trust you, because I can't stand the thought of anyone else even thinking they could touch you. Possessive much? I asked, but my voice was softer. Absolutely, Christian agreed. You're mine, Sienna, and anyone who forgets that, anyone who looks at you, photographs you, even thinks about approaching you, they're going to learn exactly what happens when they disrespect what belongs to me. The claim should have bothered me, should have triggered my independence streak. Instead, it made something warm bloom in my chest, because he wasn't being controlling, he was being terrified. I'm not leaving, I said again, moving closer. And you're not sending me away. We handle this together, even if that means dealing with doctored photos and invasive surveillance and Volkov's psychological warfare. You're impossible, Christian said, pulling me against him. I'm yours, I corrected. There's a difference. He kissed me then, desperate and claiming, and I kissed him back, thinking that between explosions and death threats and invasive photos, our life had become absolutely insane, but I still wouldn't change it, not even a little. Chapter 5. Her strategy.
I'm not feeling well.
And the secret she's keeping. The morning after Volkov's offer, I woke up feeling awful. Not emotionally, though that was also true, but physically. The nausea that had been occasional was now persistent, and I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up everything I'd managed to eat yesterday. You okay? Marco called through the door, because apparently my brother had developed supernatural hearing when it came to distress. Fine, I lied, rinsing my mouth. Just stress. That's the 3rd morning in a row, Marco observed when I emerged. Maybe you should see a doctor. It's stress, I repeated firmly, because acknowledging any other possibility felt impossible right now. Or it's food poisoning, Marco suggested. Or a stomach bug. Or, he stopped, his eyes widening slightly. Wait, Sienna, when was your last period? I stared at him, my brain suddenly doing math I'd been deliberately avoiding. That's invasive. That's a relevant medical question, Marco corrected. And from the look on your face, you just realized what I realized. I'm not pregnant, I said, but it came out uncertain. When was your last period? Marco repeated, enunciating each word. I tried to remember, counting back weeks while my stomach did complicated gymnastics. 6 weeks? Maybe 7. Sienna, Marco said carefully, that's not stress. That's biology. I can't be pregnant, I said, panic rising. Not now. Not with Volkov threatening us and bombs going off, and life doesn't care about convenient timing, Marco interrupted gently, which is why we're getting you a test. Now, we can't just walk to a pharmacy, I protested. I'm on lockdown, remember? Which is why I'm sending Marcus, Marco replied, already texting. He'll be discreet. And then we'll know for sure, instead of you spiraling about maybes. 30 minutes later, Marcus returned with 3 different pregnancy tests, because apparently even security chiefs overthink purchases when they're nervous. And I locked myself in the bathroom trying not to think about the implications while Marco waited outside, probably having a crisis of his own. All 3 tests came back positive. I stared at the little plus signs trying to process that I was pregnant, that there was a tiny human growing inside me, while Russian criminals tried to murder me, and my husband orchestrated counterattacks, and our life was complete chaos. Sienna, Marco called. You've been in there for 15 minutes. I'm getting concerned. I opened the door, showed him the tests, and watched his expression cycle through shock, joy, panic, and something that looked almost like tears. You're pregnant, he said, like saying it out loud made it more real. Apparently, I managed. That's... Marco stopped, seeming to struggle with words. That's amazing, and terrible, and terrifying, and I'm going to be an uncle, which is the best news I've had in months. And also, Christian is going to lose his entire mind. I can't tell him, I said immediately. What? Marco asked. Sienna, you have to tell him. He deserves to know. He'll use it as another reason to send me away, I said, to lock me up somewhere, safe, while he handles everything alone. I need time to figure out how to handle this without him making decisions for me. That's... Marco stopped, clearly warring between brother loyalty and common sense. That's a terrible plan. That's my only plan, I corrected. Marco, please, give me a few days. Let me figure out Volkov first, then I'll tell him. I promise. My brother studied me for a long moment before sighing heavily. You're going to give me gray hair before I'm 30. You know that, right? Consider it preparation for uncle duties, I replied, trying for humor, even though I felt like crying or screaming or both. Fine, Marco said. But Sienna, you have to be careful now. Not just for you, he gestured vaguely at my stomach, for tiny human reasons. I will be, I promised. The rest of the morning was spent pretending everything was normal, while my brain spiraled about the fact that I was pregnant during a Mafia war, which felt like terrible planning even by my compromised standards. Around noon, Christian found me in his office staring at surveillance maps of Volkov's known locations, and something in my expression must have looked off because he immediately moved closer. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing, I lied, pulling myself together, just thinking about Volkov's offer, and trying to figure out if there's another way. There is no other way, Christian said firmly. I'm not negotiating with him. I'm not giving him what he wants, and I'm definitely not letting him anywhere near you. What if we gave him something else he wants? I suggested. Something that matters as much as revenge. Like what? Christian challenged. The man lost his family. There's nothing that replaces that. No, I agreed. But what if we reminded him he still has family left? Family he's risking by pursuing this vendetta. Christian went very still. What are you talking about? I pulled up files Marco and I had been compiling over the past few days, showing documentation that had taken considerable effort to acquire. Volkov has a daughter, Katya Volkov, now Katya Sokolov. She survived the raid that killed his wife. She's 26, living in Prague, runs a legitimate art gallery, hasn't spoken to her father in 8 years. How did you find this? Christian asked, scanning the information with sharp focus. Marco helped, I admitted. We've been analyzing Volkov's network, looking for weak points. His daughter is his weak point. He's kept her hidden, protected her from his world, probably so no one uses her the way he's trying to use me. So... you want to threaten her, Christian said slowly. Use her as leverage. No, I corrected. I want to remind him that pursuing revenge means she becomes a target, that if he wants her to stay safe and separate from his world, he needs to walk away from this. That's... Christian stopped, something shifting in his expression. That's actually strategic, and considerably more humane than what I was planning. Which was, I asked. Considerably less humane, he replied dryly. But Sienna, approaching his daughter means exposing ourselves. If she warns him, she won't, I interrupted. She hasn't spoken to him in years. She changed her name, moved countries, built a life completely separate from his. She doesn't want to be part of his world. We're not threatening that. We're protecting it. Christian studied the files for a long moment before looking at me with something that looked almost like pride. You're very good at this. Frighteningly good. Have I mentioned that? Once or twice, I said, warmth blooming despite everything. So we try it. We contact her. We try it, Christian agreed, but carefully. And Sienna, if this works, if we can end this without more violence, you just saved a lot of lives. Including ours, I pointed out. Especially ours, he agreed, pulling me close and kissing me with the kind of desperate intensity that made everything else fade for a moment. When we broke apart, I almost told him about the pregnancy. Almost. But Marco caught my eye from the doorway and shook his head slightly, and I held back. Just a few more days, I told myself. Handle Volkov first. Then handle telling my husband he's going to be a father while we're in the middle of a war. What could possibly go wrong? Chapter 6. The Meeting.
Hello, can we talk?
3 days later, contacting Katya Sokolov had required delicate handling. We'd used an intermediary who explained the situation without threats, emphasizing that we wanted to protect her safety rather than compromise it. She'd agreed to a phone call, cautious but clearly concerned about her father's actions. I haven't spoken to him in 8 years, she'd said, her English accented but clear. Since I learned what he really did, what his organization was involved in, I wanted nothing to do with that world. We're not asking you to contact him, I'd assured her. We're asking permission to tell him that continuing this vendetta means painting a target on you, that people who want to hurt him will look for his daughter. We're asking if we can use you as a reason for him to stop. She'd been quiet for a long moment before agreeing. If it saves lives, including his, then yes, tell him. Maybe he'll listen. Now we were back at the same restaurant, same setup as before, except this time I was in the room. Christian had fought me on it, but I'd pointed out that the strategy was mine and I deserved to see it through. Plus, I'd used the "I'm carrying your child and refusing to be excluded from this" logic in my head, even though I hadn't said it out loud yet. Volkov arrived with the same men as before, looking older and more tired, and his eyes found me immediately with uncomfortable assessment. "Mrs. Rossi," he said, and the formality felt mocking. "How unexpected. Your husband allows you out of your fortress. My husband doesn't allow or disallow me anything," I replied coolly. "We're partners. He doesn't make decisions about my safety without my input." "How modern," Volkov said, sitting across from us. "So, you have new offer, or you finally accept mine?" "We have information," Christian said, sliding a folder across the table. "About your daughter." I watched Volkov's expression shift from mocking to absolutely lethal in the space of a heartbeat. "You threaten Katya?" "I kill everyone in this room," he said flatly. "Nah, and burn your world to ground." "We're not threatening her," I said quickly. "We contacted her, with her permission. She's concerned about you." Volkov stared at me like I'd said something incomprehensible. "You spoke to my daughter?" "Briefly," I confirmed. "We explained the situation, told her you were pursuing revenge that could endanger her, asked if we could use her safety as reason for you to reconsider, and she said," Volkov asked, his voice dangerous. "She said if it saves lives, including yours, we should tell you," I replied. "She hasn't spoken to you in 8 years, but she doesn't want you dead, and she definitely doesn't want to become a target because you're making enemies of powerful families." "You do not use my daughter as leverage," Volkov said, but I heard uncertainty beneath the fury. "We're not using her as leverage," Christian corrected. "We're reminding you that revenge has costs beyond just your life, that your daughter, who's built a good, legitimate life away from all of this, becomes vulnerable the moment you make us your enemies. Not because we'd hurt her, we wouldn't, but because others would. Your enemies. Our enemies. People who see her as a way to hurt you or pressure us." Volkov was quiet for a long moment, and I saw him struggle with fury and fear in equal measure. "She is happy?" he asked finally, his voice rough. "In Prague. She is safe." "She seems happy," I said gently. "She runs an art gallery, has friends, a life that's completely separate from this world, and she wants to keep it that way." "I wanted same," Volkov admitted. "When I sent her away after her mother died, I wanted her safe, away from all of this." "Then honor that," I said. "Walk away from this revenge. Let her stay safe and separate. Don't make her a target by pursuing a war you can't win." "Cannot win," Volkov repeated, and I heard wounded pride. "You can't. Christian said bluntly. You're one man with limited resources facing multiple established families. You might hurt us, you might even kill some of us, but you'll lose, and your daughter will spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, because you taught our enemies she matters to you. I watched Volkov process this, saw him age 10 years in 10 seconds, and felt something almost like pity. I loved my wife, he said quietly. 30 years together. She was everything, and I lost her because of you. You lost her because you trafficked children, Christian corrected, his voice hard. Because you built a business on misery and suffering, and when I found out, I stopped it. The raid wasn't my fault. Your choices led to that raid. Own that. I have owned it, Volkov replied. Every day in prison, every night dreaming of revenge. But you are right about one thing. Katya should not suffer for my choices. She has suffered enough. Then end this, I said. Walk away. Let us both go back to our lives. Let your daughter stay safe. Volkov was quiet for a long moment before nodding slowly. I will consider. But Rossi, if anything happens to Katya, if anyone threatens her because of this conversation, I will know who to blame. Nothing will happen to her, Christian promised. You have my word. We want this over as much as you do. More, probably. Before Volkov could respond, one of his men, the same one who'd shown the doctored photos, moved suddenly, and I saw the gun before my brain processed what was happening. He's weak, the man shouted in Russian. He's betraying what we came here to do. I won't let... Christian moved before I could blink, pushing me behind him while simultaneously drawing his own weapon, and the restaurant erupted into chaos. Marcus and the other security personnel reacted instantly, but the shooter was already firing, and I watched in horror as Christian jerked backward, blood blooming on his shoulder. No! I screamed, catching him as he stumbled. Volkov had reacted too, shooting his own man with lethal precision, and the traitor dropped before he could fire again. Get her out! Christian ordered Marcus, his voice tight with pain. Get her out now. I'm not leaving you, I protested, pressing my hands to his shoulder trying to stop the bleeding. You're pregnant, Christian said, and my heart stopped. Marco told me this morning, and you're not staying here where people are shooting. Go. Now. You knew, I managed, shock mixing with fear. I knew, he confirmed, wincing as Marcus applied pressure to the wound. Marco caved after 3 hours of me asking why you looked different. Now go before I pass out and can't argue anymore. Marcus was already pulling me toward the exit, and I looked back to see Volkov kneeling beside his dead man, with something broken in his expression. We are done, Volkov called after us. Tell your wife. She has my word. This is finished. And then we were outside, and I was shaking, and Christian's blood was on my hands, and I realized that my plan had worked, but the cost was nearly losing him anyway. Chapter 7. Blood, Truth, and Surprising Allies.
How are you?
The bullet had gone through clean, in and out of Christian's shoulder without hitting anything vital, but watching him in the hospital bed with IV lines and monitors beeping felt like my worst nightmare materializing. Stop looking at me like I'm dying, Christian said, his voice rough but amused. It's a shoulder wound. I've had worse. That's not comforting, I replied, sitting beside him and carefully taking his uninjured hand. You've been shot before. Occupationally hazardous, he said, squeezing my fingers. But Sienna, we need to talk about the fact that you're pregnant and didn't tell me. Marco has a big mouth, I muttered. Marco lasted 3 hours under interrogation, which is impressive, Christian corrected. I asked him why you looked different, why you weren't eating properly, why you kept disappearing to the bathroom looking green. He cracked around question 47. You asked 47 questions, I asked, torn between annoyed and touched. I was thorough, Christian replied, and concerned. And Sienna, when were you planning to tell me? After Volkov was handled, I admitted. I knew if you found out earlier, you'd use it as another reason to send me away, to make decisions without me. You're absolutely right, he agreed, surprising me. I would have locked you somewhere so secure even I couldn't reach you, and I would have handled Volkov with considerably more violence than necessary. So tactically, keeping it secret made sense. Really? I asked, suspicious of his reasonableness. Really, Christian confirmed. But Sienna, we're having a baby. He stopped, emotion crossing his face. That's everything, and I needed to know, even if it made me insane with protectiveness. How are you feeling? I asked carefully. About the baby part specifically. Terrified, Christian admitted, ecstatic, completely unprepared, like I want to simultaneously wrap you in protective layers and also dance around this hospital room, except I currently can't move my arm without wanting to die. I laughed despite everything, leaning closer carefully. We're going to be parents. We're going to be terrible at it, Christian said, but he was smiling. Between my criminal empire and your control issues, this child doesn't stand a chance. They'll be perfectly adjusted, I argued. With therapy. Lots of therapy. So much therapy, he agreed. pulling me closer with his good arm. But they'll be ours, and loved, and protected. Speaking of protected, Marco said from the doorway, startling both of us. The entire Cavalieri and Rossi families are in the waiting room having what I can only describe as an emotional crisis. Also, Dad is crying. Again. He knows about the baby, I asked, sitting up. Someone may have mentioned it, Marco said innocently. By someone I mean me, because the man was pacing like his daughter had been shot instead of his son-in-law. And I thought good news might help. How did he take it? I asked nervously. He cried, hugged me, called Mom, cried more, demanded to see you, and is currently trying to convince hospital security that being a grandfather grants him immediate visitation rights, Marco reported. It's very entertaining. Let him in, Christian said, amused. Before he intimidates the entire staff. My father appeared 30 seconds later looking uncharacteristically emotional, and his eyes immediately found me with the kind of concern that made my chest tight. You're okay, he said, crossing to hug me carefully. Both of you. All three of you. Technically. We're fine, Dad, I assured him. Christian took the bullet. I'm completely uninjured. You're pregnant, my father said, pulling back to study my face. My little girl is having a baby. I'm 28, Dad, I pointed out. Not exactly a little girl. You'll always be my little girl, he replied, and I watched tears actually form in his eyes. Even when you're married to a man who gets shot protecting you, even when you're having babies of your own, always. Giovanni, my mother said, appearing behind him with tissues. You promised you wouldn't cry in front of them. I'm not crying, my father said, accepting the tissue and immediately using it. I'm expressing appropriate paternal emotion. You're sobbing, Marco observed helpfully. Very impressively, actually. I didn't know you had this many tears. I'm a grandfather, my father said, ignoring Marco entirely and focusing on me. I'm going to be a nonno. This is the best news I've had since you married someone who actually deserves you. Debatable, Christian said from the bed, but he was smiling. But Giovanni, thank you for everything. Your support, your resources, your willingness to see past old prejudices. You took a bullet for my daughter, my father replied, moving to shake Christian's uninjured hand. That erases a lot of prejudice, though I still maintain you're slightly insane for marrying a Cavalieri woman. We're complicated. I noticed, Christian said dryly, glancing at me, but worth it. Extremely worth it. My father agreed, and I watched them share a moment of understanding that felt significant. Before anyone could get more emotional, Marcus appeared looking tense. We have a visitor, he said, requesting permission to see you both. Says it's important. Who? Christian asked, already tensing. Dmitry Volkov, Marcus replied. He's in the lobby, unarmed, alone. Says he wants to finish the conversation we started. The room went silent, and I felt my father's hand on my shoulder protectively. Absolutely not, Giovanni said. He's not getting anywhere near you. Actually, Christian said carefully, I think we should hear him out. He kept his word at the restaurant. Let his man die rather than letting him continue shooting. That means something. It means he's unpredictable, my father countered. Or it means he's done, I said quietly. With the revenge, with the war, with all of it. Christian nodded slowly. Let him up. But Marcus, you and 2 others stay in the room. And Giovanni, if you want to stay. I'm staying, my father said firmly. Someone needs to witness whatever deal you're making. Volkov arrived 5 minutes later looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him, and his eyes immediately went to Christian's bandaged shoulder, with something that might have been regret. You are alive, he said. This is good. Considering your man shot me, I'm not sure you get credit for that, Christian replied. Alexei was not following my orders, Volkov said heavily. He was following his own anger. I hired him because he was loyal and violent. I did not realize he was too violent to control. Is that an apology? I asked. That is explanation, Volkov corrected, then paused. But yes, also apology. You offered me reasonable solution, way to end this without more death, and I was considering it when Alexei decided violence was better answer. So where does that leave us? Christian asked. I spoke to my daughter, Volkov said, and something in his voice broke slightly. After restaurant, after shooting, I called her, first time in 8 years. She was surprised and angry, and she told me if I kept pursuing revenge, she would disappear completely, change her name again, make sure I could never find her. That's, I started. That is what finally made me listen, Volkov interrupted. Not your threats, not your logic, my daughter, telling me she would erase herself from my life if I did not stop. That is what broke me. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Do not be sorry. Volkov replied. Be grateful, because I am offering you what I should have offered before. True peace, complete withdrawal. I return to Russia. You never hear from me again, and my daughter stays safe and separate from all of this. And in exchange? Christian asked carefully. Nothing, Volkov said, surprising everyone. I have already lost everything that mattered. My wife, years with my daughter, my organization, my reputation. Taking more from you does not give me back what I lost. It just creates more suffering. The room was silent for a long moment before Christian spoke. You have my word, he said. Your daughter will never be touched. By us or anyone associated with us. She stays safe, separate, and completely outside of this world. And if anyone threatens her, you tell us. We'll handle it. Why would you do this? Volkov asked suspiciously. Protect daughter of man who tried to kill you. Because I'm about to be a father, Christian said, glancing at me. And I understand wanting to protect your child from the consequences of your choices. I'd do anything to keep my child safe from this world. You're trying to do the same. I respect that. I watched Volkov's expression shift, something almost like gratitude breaking through the exhaustion. You will be good father, he said finally. Better than I was. You already protect her. He gestured to me. Even when it means getting shot. That is what matters. Does this mean we have an agreement? My father asked, speaking for the first time since Volkov entered. We have peace, Volkov confirmed. True peace. I will return to Moscow tonight. You will not hear from me again. Unless it is to thank you for keeping promise about Katya. He left before anyone could respond, and I watched him go, thinking about how strange it was that a man who'd tried to kill us was now the reason we might actually have a future. Well, Marco said into the silence, that was unexpectedly civilized. Should I be concerned? You should be relieved, Christian corrected, pulling me closer carefully. This is over, actually over, and we can focus on things that matter, like becoming parents while maintaining my criminal empire, and your sanity simultaneously. Impossible task, I observed. We've done harder, he replied, and kissed me despite the audience. And I kissed him back thinking that we'd survived explosions, threats, shootings, and my father crying twice in 1 month. We could probably handle a baby. Probably. Chapter 8. Rebuilding 3 months later.
Everything is so beautiful.
You're nesting, Marco observed, watching me reorganize the nursery for the 3rd time that week. Like, aggressively nesting. Those books are already alphabetized. They're alphabetized by author, I corrected, moving them again. They should be organized by theme for developmental appropriateness. The baby can't read, Marco pointed out. Upon the baby will appreciate organizational logic when they're older, I replied, continuing my project. You've lost your mind, Marco said, but he was smiling. Pregnancy has broken your brain. Pregnancy has given me purpose, I corrected. An acceptable reason to organize things without Christian questioning my sanity. I always question your sanity, Christian said from the doorway, looking amused. Pregnancy just makes it more entertaining to watch. He'd recovered fully from the gunshot wound, 6 weeks of physical therapy, and considerably more protectiveness than I'd anticipated, but otherwise back to normal. Whatever normal meant for a Mafia Don preparing for fatherhood. How was the meeting? I asked, abandoning the books to kiss him hello. Productive, Christian replied. The Eastern families agreed to the new territory divisions. Volkov kept his word, completely silent for 3 months. And your father cried again when I mentioned the baby shower. That's the 4th time this month, Marco said, impressed. He's really committed to this emotional grandfather thing. He bought a rocking chair, I said. Had it custom made. Delivered it yesterday with a note about Cavalieri family traditions and instructions for proper baby rocking technique. Your father has instructions for rocking babies? Christian asked, delighted. Apparently it's very technical, I replied. There's a diagram. Marco framed it. I did frame it, Marco confirmed. It's art, comedic art, but art. The past 3 months had been surprisingly normal, or as normal as life could be when you were married to someone who occasionally handled business that required careful phrasing and plausible deniability. But mostly, it had been good. We'd moved into a house, actual house with a yard, because Christian had decided the penthouse wasn't one appropriate for raising children, even though I'd pointed out many children were raised in apartments perfectly well. Not my children, he'd said with finality. And 2 weeks later, we had a house in a secure neighborhood with a garden that reminded me uncomfortably and wonderfully of the garden where we'd gotten married. You did this on purpose, I'd said, standing in the backyard looking at the roses. I wanted you to remember where this started, Christian had replied, pulling me close. In a garden, with your father crying and Marco trying not to laugh. This felt right. He'd been right. It did feel right. My mother had claimed one of the guest rooms as her grandmother headquarters, and visited twice a week to help with nursery preparations while providing running commentary on everything I was doing wrong, which I found simultaneously annoying and comforting. You're folding the onesies incorrectly, she'd said last week. There's a correct way to fold onesies. I'd asked. There's a Cavalieri way, she'd corrected, showing me with the kind of precision usually reserved for military operations. My father, true to form, had responded to impending grandfatherhood by crying at inappropriate times and buying approximately 47 children's books about family legacy and Italian heritage. He's trying, my mother had explained. He never got to do this with you. Be present and emotional and openly affectionate. He's making up for lost time. By sobbing at baby stores? I'd asked. By loving openly, she'd corrected gently. Let him. So I had. I'd let my father cry when we'd told him the baby's sex, a girl. I'd let him cry when we'd picked her name, Valentina Rose, after Christian's mother in the garden. I'd let him cry when we'd had our first family dinner at the new house, and he'd toasted to new generations and old promises kept. You've turned him into a completely different person, I'd told Christian that night. I've given him permission to be who he always was underneath, Christian had corrected. Terrifying and sentimental simultaneously. Very Italian. Marco had embraced Uncle Duties with enthusiasm that bordered on obsessive, showing up with age-inappropriate toys and detailed plans for teaching his niece important life skills. She's not even born yet, and you've already planned her first 5 years, I'd observed, looking at his spreadsheet. I'm being proactive, Marco had defended. Someone needs to teach her proper sarcasm. It might as well be me. She's going to be a nightmare, Christian had said, but he'd been smiling. She's going to be perfect, I'd corrected. Now, standing in the nursery with both of them watching me organize books by developmental themes, I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't even realized was unsettled. Peace. Actual peace. I can't believe this is real, I admitted quietly. 8 months ago, I was walking into a corridor naked and terrified. Now I'm married, pregnant, organizing nursery books, and my father cries at baby stores. Character development, Marco supplied helpfully. Life development, Christian corrected, moving closer. You went from woman who couldn't accept help to woman who built an entire family. That's not small. We built it, I corrected. Together, through explosions and threats, and your tendency to get shot protecting me. Only shot once, Christian protested. I'm very careful. Once is enough, I replied, but I was smiling. Marco's phone buzzed, and he checked it before grinning. Valentina just texted. Apparently she heard through the family network that you're having a baby and she's delighted for you both. Also, she's engaged to the finance executive, and they're very happy in London. Good for her, I said, meaning it. She deserves happiness. Everyone deserves happiness, Christian said, pulling me close carefully around my growing stomach. Even people who started by seeing each other naked in forbidden corridors. Especially them, I agreed, and kissed him, while Marco made exaggerated gagging noises in the background. You two are disgustingly sweet, Marco observed. It's very off-brand for a Mafia power couple. We're redefining the brand, Christian replied. We're living our lives, I corrected, occasionally dramatically, mostly happily, always together. That's very romantic and also very cheesy, Marco said. I'm leaving before you make me cry like Dad. I have a reputation to maintain. He left, and Christian and I stood in the nursery surrounded by carefully organized books and baby furniture and the life we'd built from chaos and forbidden attraction and absolute insanity. I love you, I said, because it felt important to say out loud. I love you too, Christian replied. Even when you alphabetize things obsessively and refuse to leave dangerous situations and make me insane with worry. Especially then, I corrected. Especially then, he agreed. And we stood there in our daughter's future room thinking about everything we'd survived to get here. And somehow, it had all been worth it. Chapter 9. Valentina Rose.
I need to go to the hospital.
My water broke at 3 a.m. during what had been a perfectly normal evening of me reorganizing the kitchen pantry because apparently nesting didn't stop even at 9 months pregnant. Christian, I called, remarkably calm considering. We need to go to the hospital. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in pajama pants looking alert, despite having been asleep 30 seconds ago. Took one look at me standing in a puddle and immediately shifted into crisis mode. Okay, he said, already moving. Okay, hospital. Right, I have the bag. Where's the bag? By the door, I replied, where it's been for 3 weeks. Because I'm organized and you're panicking. I'm not panicking, Christian said, clearly panicking. I'm efficiently preparing for— Why are you reorganizing spices right now? Contraction? I said through gritted teeth, gripping the counter. Just let me finish. No, Christian interrupted, gently pulling me away from the alphabetized spices. You're having our baby. The oregano can wait. But it's not properly. Sienna, he said firmly, framing my face with his hands. Breathe. The spices don't matter. You matter. Our daughter matters. Everything else can be disorganized. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me, I managed. And he laughed, despite the tension. The drive to the hospital was surprisingly calm. Christian drove with careful precision, while I timed contractions and called Marco, who answered on the first ring, sounding wide awake. It's time? He asked. It's time, I confirmed. Can you? Already calling everyone, Marco interrupted. Mom, Dad, Christian's mother, the entire extended family network. Probably some people we don't even know but will show up anyway because Italian families are like that. Thank you, I said, another contraction making me grip the door handle. You're doing great, Marco said. And Sienna, I'm really proud of you, for everything. The whole surviving Volkov thing and marrying a mafioso and growing an entire human. You're kind of amazing. Marco, I started, voice tight with emotion and pain. Tell you later, he said quickly. Focus on not having the baby in Christian's car. He'll never forgive you for the upholstery damage. He hung up, and I looked at Christian, who was concentrating on driving with the kind of focus usually reserved for business negotiations. You okay? I asked. I'm terrified, he admitted, and excited, and absolutely certain we're going to be terrible at this. We survived a mafia war, I pointed out. We can survive parenthood. One of those involved people shooting at us, Christian replied. The other involves keeping a tiny human alive for 18 years. I'm not sure which is more daunting. By the time we reached the hospital, my contractions were 5 minutes apart, and I was significantly less calm than I'd been in the kitchen. I changed my mind, I told Christian, as they wheeled me to labor and delivery. I don't want to do this anymore. Can we reschedule? That's not how biology works, he replied, holding my hand. But I'll ask if it makes you feel better. It doesn't, I said through another contraction. Nothing makes me feel better. This is terrible. Why do people do this multiple times? Temporary insanity, Christian suggested, and I would have laughed if I wasn't actively dying. The next 6 hours were a blur of pain, breathing exercises that didn't work, Christian letting me crush his hand without complaint, and my mother showing up to provide running commentary on everything the nurses were doing wrong. That's not how we did it in my generation, she said, watching the monitors. Mom, I managed between contractions, not helping. I'm providing valuable historical context, she defended. You're making the nurses nervous, Christian observed. Maybe provide historical context from the waiting room. My mother left, offended but compliant, and I focused on not dying while bringing life into the world, which felt paradoxically accurate for my current situation. Around 9 a.m., my doctor announced it was time to push, and I gripped Christian's hand with strength I didn't know I possessed. You can do this, he said, his voice steady, even though I could see fear in his eyes. You're the strongest person I know. You walked into that corridor naked and faced me without flinching. You can do this. That's your motivational speech, I asked between pushes, reminding me about the worst moment of my life. That was the best moment of mine, Christian corrected, because it led to everything else, to this, to us, to her, and somehow that helped. 20 minutes later, at 9:47 a.m., Valentina Rose Rossi entered the world screaming with impressive volume, and I watched Christian's expression transform into something I'd never seen before. Absolute wonder, mixed with terror, mixed with love so overwhelming it looked painful. She's perfect, he said, his voice completely wrecked. Sienna, she's perfect. She's ours, I corrected, and burst into tears that were equal parts exhaustion and joy and hormones. They placed her on my chest, tiny and red and screaming, and I felt everything else fade away except this moment, this person, this impossible gift we'd created from chaos and forbidden attraction. An absolute insanity. Hello, Valentina, I whispered. We're your parents. We're going to be terrible at this, but we'll love you so much it won't matter. Christian leaned down to kiss both of us, and I saw tears on his face that he wasn't bothering to hide. My father would have loved her, he said quietly. He would have said she has your stubbornness and my terrible timing. He would have been right, I agreed. The door opened and Marco appeared, saw us, and immediately started crying. You're crying, I observed. I'm not crying, Marco protested, clearly crying. I'm experiencing appropriate uncle emotions. There's a difference. You sound like Dad, I said. Dad is in the hallway sobbing, Marco reported. Has been for approximately 10 minutes. Mom's trying to calm him down, but he's inconsolable. It's very touching and slightly embarrassing. Let him in, I said. He should meet his granddaughter. My father appeared moments later, took one look at Valentina, and completely fell apart. She's beautiful, he managed through tears. She looks like you did, when you were born, exactly like you. Dad, I started. I wasn't there, he interrupted, his voice breaking. When you were born, I was handling business. I missed it. Your mother never forgave me, and I never forgave myself. But Sienna, I'm here now. I'm here for this, for her, for all of it. I know, Dad, I said, crying too now, and it matters. You being here matters. He held Valentina with the careful reverence of someone holding something infinitely precious, and I watched my terrifying Mafia boss father become completely undone by 7 pounds of baby. Welcome to the family, Piccola, he whispered. You're going to be so loved, so protected, so completely spoiled by your nonno that your parents will hate me. We already hate you, Christian said, but he was smiling. But we love you too, so it balances. The rest of the day was a parade of visitors. My mother providing unsolicited advice, Christian's mother crying happy tears, Marcus bringing flowers, various family members I vaguely recognized, offering congratulations, and Marco documenting everything with his phone, like an obsessive historian. I'm making a photo album, he explained, titled, How Two Disasters Created Perfection. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be evidence, Christian corrected. Evidence of love, Marco replied. Very incriminating love. That evening, after everyone had finally left, and it was just us and Valentina, Christian sat in the hospital chair holding our daughter while I tried to stay awake despite exhaustion. We did it, I said quietly. You did it, he corrected. I just held your hand and made inadequate motivational speeches about corridors. It worked though, I pointed out. The corridor thing, it did lead to everything else. Best worst moment of my life, Christian agreed, looking at Valentina with absolute devotion. And this tiny human exists because I saw you naked in a place you shouldn't have been and couldn't stop thinking about you after. That's a terrible story to tell her when she's older, I observed. We'll edit it, Christian said. Say we met at a party. Very boring. Very appropriate. She'll find out the truth eventually, I said. Marco will tell her, probably with photographs and timeline documentation. Probably, Christian agreed. But by then she'll understand that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected moments. Like mafia bosses falling for women they're forbidden to have, I said. Like that, he confirmed, and kissed me carefully. I love you, both of you, all of us. This whole complicated, beautiful, occasionally violent life we built. I love you too, I replied. Even though you're possessive and overprotective and get shot occasionally. Only once, Christian protested. Once is enough, I corrected, and we sat there in comfortable silence, our daughter sleeping peacefully, thinking about everything we'd survived to get here, and somehow, it had all been worth it. Every terrifying, chaotic, beautiful moment. Epilogue, 2 years later.
I've been waiting for this.
All the Easter eggs. You will love this. I found Christian in the garden, the same garden where we'd gotten married 2.5 years ago, watching Valentina toddle through the roses with the kind of focused supervision that suggested he was mentally cataloging every potential hazard. She's fine, I called from the doorway. She's 2. Toddling is developmentally appropriate. She's fast, Christian countered, and determined. Yesterday, she climbed onto the kitchen counter while I was making coffee. I turned around for 30 seconds. She gets that from you, I observed, moving to join them. The determination and the climbing things she shouldn't. She gets the climbing from you, Christian corrected, catching Valentina as she nearly face-planted into a rose bush. You're the one who thought scaling the trellis to our bedroom window was romantic. It was romantic, I defended, and I was proving a point about security vulnerabilities. You were drunk after your mother's birthday party, Christian corrected, but he was smiling, and you gave Marco a heart attack when he saw you on the security feeds. Speaking of security feeds, I said, watching Valentina examine a flower with intense toddler focus. Remember when your cameras caught us in that corridor? I try to forget, Christian replied. Your father brings it up every family dinner. Me, the night I saw my daughter naked on security footage with the Rossi Dawn. It's his favorite embarrassing story. It's how we started, I pointed out. Me walking out of that steam room thinking I was alone. You standing there looking like you'd seen a ghost. Neither of us able to pretend after that moment. Best security breach of my life, Christian said, pulling me close while keeping eyes on Valentina. Though I maintain you should have checked if the corridor was empty first. I maintain you should have announced your presence, I countered, instead of just standing there staring. I was processing, he defended. You were naked. My brain short-circuited. Mama, Valentina called, holding up a flower she'd somehow managed to pick. Pretty. Very pretty, baby, I agreed, taking the rose carefully. She's like you, she beamed, then immediately tried to eat the flower, which Christian prevented with reflexes honed by 2 years of constant toddler supervision. Remember when I was pregnant with her? I asked, sitting on the bench that my father had installed specifically for proper grandmother sitting during garden visits. And Volkov was threatening us and you got shot? I try not to remember that part, Christian admitted. And though the shooting led to your father crying, which led to him becoming emotionally available, which led to him being the world's most involved grandfather. So silver lining. whining. He bought her 14 stuffed animals last week, I said. 14. She has a collection now. He's making up for lost time, Christian observed. With you. With her. With being openly affectionate instead of just terrifying. It's actually beautiful to watch. It's exhausting to watch, I corrected. He cried at her birthday party. For 40 minutes. Because Archie's growing up too fast. She's 2, Christian said, amused. She has approximately 16 more years of growing up. Try telling him that, I replied. He's already planning her quinceañera. She's 2. Marco appeared from the house carrying what looked like more documentation for his obsessive photo album project. I come bearing gifts, he announced. Specifically, photographic evidence of the past 2 years of chaos, complete with annotations and timeline. You need a hobby, I observed. This is my hobby, Marco corrected, showing us his tablet displaying a carefully organized digital album titled From Corridor to Chaos to Contentment, A Family History. You actually titled it that? Christian asked. Delighted. It's accurate, Marco defended. Look, I have sections. The corridor incident, the marriage negotiation, the Luca problem, the Volkov threat, the pregnancy reveal, the birth, Valentina's first 2 years. I'm very thorough. You're very concerning, I said, but I was smiling. Concerning is just another word for dedicated, Marco replied, sitting beside us. And speaking of dedicated, Valentina just tried to eat another flower. Christian had already intervened, redirecting our daughter toward a butterfly instead, and I watched him navigate toddlerhood with the same strategic precision he applied to everything else. Remember our first family dinner? I asked Marco, after we got engaged? When Dad interrogated Christian for 3 hours about his intentions, I remember Christian remaining perfectly calm while Dad described 17 different ways he'd kill him if you got hurt. Marco replied. It was impressive, also slightly terrifying. Your father is a teddy bear, Christian said. Your father is a Mafia don who cries at baby stores, Marco corrected. There's a difference. Speaking of which, I said, checking my phone. We have family dinner tonight. At Mom and Dad's, they're demanding we bring Valentina so she can experience proper Italian Sunday meals. She's 2, Christian repeated. She experiences meals by throwing food. She's learning, I defended. Last week she used a fork for almost 30 seconds before throwing it at Marco. In my defense, I was making faces at her, Marco said, and I deserve the fork. That evening's family dinner was exactly as chaotic as expected. My mother cooking enough food for 40 people despite only 12 attending. My father crying when Valentina called him nonno, and various relatives I vaguely recognized providing unsolicited parenting advice that I smiled at politely while internally ignoring. She should be eating more vegetables, my Aunt Maria declared. She threw broccoli at me yesterday, I replied, with impressive accuracy. I think she's getting enough vegetables. When I raised my children, Maria started. Your children are in therapy, Marco interrupted helpfully. Maybe we use a different model. I caught Christian's eye across the table and watched him suppress a smile. Because family dinners were still occasionally exhausting, but mostly just family. After dinner, while various relatives entertained Valentina, Christian and I escaped to my parents' the garden, a smaller, less formal version of our own, and stood under the stars thinking about everything that had led us here. 2.5 years ago, I said quietly, I walked into a corridor thinking I was alone, and I saw you, and everything changed. Everything changed, Christian agreed, pulling me close. I'd spent 5 years maintaining perfect distance from you because of a promise my father made to yours, and in 30 seconds of seeing you naked and vulnerable and completely yourself, I knew that promise was impossible to keep. Your father would have approved, I said, of us, of Valentina, of the life we built. Despite everything working against us, he would have, Christian confirmed. He would have said you made me better, made me human instead of just powerful, made me remember what matters. Which is? I asked. This, he said simply. Family, love, moments of peace between chaos, toddlers who throw food, fathers-in-law who cry at inappropriate times, brothers-in-law who document everything obsessively, all of it. Even the part where people occasionally try to kill us, I teased. Especially that, Christian replied, because it reminds us what we're protecting, what we're fighting for, what makes all the danger worth it. From inside, we heard Valentina laugh, followed by my father's delighted response, and Marco saying something that made everyone else laugh too. We did good, I said, leaning into Christian's warmth. We did better than good, he corrected. We survived a forbidden attraction that should have destroyed us. We survived family politics and death threats and bullets. We survived your father's crying and Marco's commentary and Volkov's revenge plot. And we came out the other side with this, with family, with love, with a daughter who throws food with impressive accuracy. Best security breach ever. I said, echoing his words from years ago. And best life ever, Christian corrected, and kissed me while our family laughed inside and our daughter played and the garden bloomed around us exactly like it had the day we'd gotten married, in defiance of everyone who'd said this couldn't work. We'd started in a corridor, naked, terrified, completely unprepared for what was coming, and now we stood in a garden, clothed, confident, completely certain that every chaotic moment had been worth it. Because some of the best things in life started with the worst timing, the most forbidden attraction, and the absolute certainty that it was going to be a disaster. And then, somehow, it became everything. The end.
And now let's talk about my interruptions. I know they're annoying. Oh, Lena, you talk too much, you're irritating. Stop making summaries. And believe it or not, I agree. But now I'm going to reveal the truth about why I do this and why I have to. On YouTube, we need to add value, comments, and show that there is a human behind all of this. Otherwise, they cut your revenue. That's how it works. And I can't survive on love alone, right? I need to eat, have a home, give milk to the kids, LOL. But seriously, for me to keep doing my job of writing romances for you and getting paid for it, I need to comply with the platform, even if you, my beloved subscribers, don't like it. I do my best not to appear too much and to make my comments as enjoyable as possible. And believe me, I really put effort into that. It could be worse, LOL. Still, I'll try to appear less and add more interesting facts throughout the story or just at the end. I'll figure out a way to improve, and if you have any tips, leave them in the comments. I'd also love to know if you enjoyed this saga of Sienna and Christian. Impossible not to fall in love with them, right? And Marco? He's the comic relief of this story. Oh my god, how I loved writing these such unique characters, such a charming family, and a threat that truly creates suspense. Handsome mafia bosses are absolutely breathtaking. Know that I love writing these stories for you. Leave a like and subscribe to my channel, because I'm getting better and better. Until next time, darling.
Все, могу забирать. Пиздец. Телевизор, нахуй. Слышите, все, попали, нахуй. Слышите, телевизор, нахуй. Ёбаный в рот, телевизор, я хуею. Как мне вести телевизор, блядь? Сука. Какой-то телевизор. Блин. Блин. Готово. Получить. Да я получил. Да хватит мне уже подсказки эти. Да похуй подсказки, я все понимаю. Слушай, телевизор, нахуй. А, это парты детские. Парты детские. Так, а как тут приступить к заказу? Приступить к заказу. И чё? А, вот маршрут. Ты мне через Яндекс, да, будешь строить? Всегда тогда. Далеко ехать? Ну нормально, нормально ехать. Он мне построил типа короткий путь по лесу. Но я как по лесу это провезу? Ломбард на соседней улице. Так, ну да, на Митина. На метро 13 минут показывает. Ну, блядь, это не тем путем, ёпта. 18 минут ехать, 3 километра. Ну, 3 километра как будто бы звучит, ну, не 20. Только как, подожди. Бля, только как, подожди. Блин, ребята, походу, нахуй я сумку с собой взял-то. Короб, если у меня нахуй тут не сдался. Что платить за один заказ? Ну, сейчас, типа, вот за 3 километра 300. Ну, по сути, нормально, только мне вот что вести. Блин, ну, у меня есть идея, короче, может... Ну, как будто вот. Сейчас попробуем, что. Блядь, только не упадите, пожалуйста, парт. Не, можно ехать, можно. Только поворачивать нельзя. О, можно. И сколько в среднем в день уходит? Я первый раз. Я вообще не шарю в этой теме. Если хочешь узнать, сколько у меня в среднем в день выходит, 300 рублей, 500 рублей, типа того. Во. Ставку довезу, не довезу. Ну, может, давай, типа, уроню, не уроню, сделай ставку. Но я не уроню, я походу понял, как это делать. Бля, прикинь, парты везу детские. Ха-ха-ха. Охуеть. Блин, а как мне в такие моменты проезжать? Сейчас машину задену, ёб твою мать. Вам не видно, оно очень габаритно по бокам. Ёбаный в рот. Я очень большой. О, не могу поворачивать. Я поворачивать не могу с таким габаритом, грузом. Нижний, ты нижний нет, блядь. Все, походу можно разгоняться. Парты детские везем. Не, ну это охуенно, слышь, 300 рублей за 3 километра, когда я, блядь, Яндекс доставку вожу, получаю за 20 километров 300 рублей. Ебать. Вертикально поставил? Как? Ты что, угораешь? Как я ее вертикально поставлю? Не вариант. Уж точно. Это 60 тапочек. Да не-не-не. Я не буду такую тапочку давать. Опасно, опасно. И так, блядь, руль не могу налево поворачивать. Ой, что-то без куртки-то нормально так припекает морозец. Морозец-то припекает. Чувствуется. Индус на голове перевоз. Отстань ты от меня, я тебе что, индус? Индусы вон в ТикТоке колеса запускают. Это все, что я сейчас про них вижу. Эти колеса постоянно у меня, каждый второй видос, эти колеса, я еще не могу оторваться, блядь. Колесо-то нихуя летит. Разойдитесь, бизнесмен будущий едет. Начинал с перевозки парт каких-то ебаных. Ладно, если честно, начал я свой первый день с мытья пола. Ну сейчас уже все, уже движение у нас лютые. Доброе утро, доброе утро. Возьми тележку и с перикой, скотчем вози. Блять, а если реально... Ты гениальный человек, подожди. А если я куплю телегу и ее привезу к мотопеду? Что будет? Получится? Слышите, это гений человек написал. Телегу перевозить. Я тогда холодильник любой везу, мне кажется. Блять, у меня нету левого поворотника. Ой, поворачивать тоже не могу. У меня поворотник только правый, сука. Пизда мне будет. Не знаю, не верю, что будет все плохо. Думаю, что и с этим можно что-то придумать. Давай. Телегу забанят к апрелю, так что не покупай. Блять, не эту телегу я имею в виду не телеграм.